Set on the album. We're rolling, Bob. Okay, so Marcus Aurelius. We're talking about the year 102 to 180 AD. And welcome, come on in. Marcus Aurelius was one of the emperors of the Roman Empire, and his whole philosophy was about being virtuous, about being of good character. And I really picked up on this when I was reading his meditations, because what he's presenting as a world leader, he was on the world stage. Rome was the big empire, that was it in the world, and he was at the head of it. And we're reading his book about improvement of character. Here we are 2,000 years later reading these notes he wrote about not giving into anger, not falling into jealousy, not resenting things with people, but simply adjusting our own behaviour, being able to self-regulate instead of externalise our turmoil. And this particularly struck me because when I look around at world leadership today, I wonder in 2,000 years who from world leadership currently we're going to be reading for personal advice about betterment of our character. And my notepad's still blank. So what I think is most important to understand, I'll go into the details of the creation of the music, but I want to give a really thorough foundation on why we're even here today. Aurelius laid out this pathway, if you like, of living by virtue, compassion, charity, kindness, all these sorts of qualities that we would hope to embody ourselves, and I hope certainly for people with duty of care and huge responsibilities to nations would also be well and truly embodying, and on top of their own tendencies in the other directions to be able to self-regulate. So Aurelius really picked up on the importance of this, and to me what it represents is someone who was able to make sacrifices, and he was able to see the value and the importance and the imperative nature of being able to sacrifice the easy for the difficult, short term for the long term, the pleasant for the unpleasant, the easy, the difficult, the long way round, the long route to the destination, sacrificing the short route to have that instead. And these are all things that I think in our modern times have been a bit lost. So hence my inspiration behind the work. So that takes care of some of the obvious stuff. I just want to read a couple of quotes to fortify what I'm saying from Aurelius. Here's a good one. Just turn that off. Okay. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realise this and you will find peace. So pretty simple. The world's not the problem. It's how we respond can be the problem or not, depending on how we choose it. Dwell on the beauty of life, watch the stars, and see yourself running with them. You know, so much life in the sphere of power, in the corridors of power, is not about that. It's not about appreciating and dwelling in the wonder, I would say, the wonder of nature, the wonder of the planet, the wonder of life. And I think here's where we start to enter into the underworld, because when we're not living in wonder and inspiration and love and care and kindness and compassion, we become fiercely competitive animals at the best. And so this theme of self-regulation, I just want to take it up a notch. So we're talking about the obvious stuff like someone's angry, they learn to regulate their emotions and process them instead. It's a victory, it's a step up, it's an improvement of character. However, where that often doesn't get seen is on a national level, for instance, or an international level, where there's a duty of care, and a nation may have insufficient health care for all their people, or they might have insufficient education for all their people. And for a leader to not understand that for that to happen and do nothing about it is massive dysregulation. It's a display of extraordinary levels of dysregulation, the equivalent of somebody having a violent emotional outburst. But it's often not seen like that because we can talk in clever ways and run narratives and blame other people. But this, what I'm hoping to illustrate with this work today and this underpinning philosophy is that this sets a whole new standard for leadership. It's a leadership that's based on integrity all the way up, not just in my own little sphere, so I feel calmer, my family's calmer, we have nice holidays, and the rest of the nation collapses into disarray and neglect, and that's not seen as dysfunctional. So Aurelius puts this on the map as being highly dysfunctional if we are the caregiver in that duty of care role. So that's pretty much the philosophy side of it all. Where it comes to the music, I wanted to represent these ideas in music, and this has been the quest of, I think, artists and musicians since the antiquities and probably before. Even if you look at the cave paintings, the fact that they made them represents something in the human spirit that wants to represent some kind of foundational experience of humanity, like a handprint or a drawing of an animal, which were the key things. People, handprints, footprints, animals in those times were the key foundations of survival and existence. So in a similar way, my works represent, my aspiration with them is to represent those foundational things that are important to us. And in a divergent society like our own, everyone's entitled to their own opinion and everyone's entitled to their own standards. And I think that this is an opportunity to represent things through the arts which are encouraging and engendering of reminding us of this possibility. The arts, for too long for me, have been slipped into the bracket of entertainment and marketing, and I feel that we need to return to what I would call the sacred, which has got nothing to do with organised corporate religion. It's simply to do with being in integrity and being connected with everything around you in your environment, humanity, the planet, and our behaviour as much. So what I've done to represent these different elements in the music, firstly, I've researched as much as I can the authentic performance of music from Aurelius's time. And there's a fair bit around where people have translated from stone engravings where there were actually early recordings of words and pictures that were actually recorded on these, what they call stelae, these in Greek, these stone tablets. And what's interesting is listening to the phrasing in these reproductions where people have recreations where people have recreated that music as accurately as they were able, is that the phrasing is a little bit different from what, as I guess someone in an Anglo culture is used to. So we have certain ways we phrase our words and our speech that we're familiar with, and our music, when it involves words, but to some extent just the metre of the music anyway, tends to represent in quite a large capacity that assumption of what we might call the rhyming or the rhythm of the words and the verse. So let's take something very simple, and I'm going to talk about this wonderful instrument in a moment. Clear up the philosophy and theory first. If we take something very, very simple, like a folk tune, that phrasing suits most European languages. It suits, at least the Latin-based, especially the Anglo and Anglo-Saxon language. It fits in quite nicely. Now, what happens when you hear these recreations of the ancient music from antiquity is that the phrasing suits the ancient Greek language, not English. So you end up with these, apart from a few different scales and things, you end up with the equivalent, as my learned friend here, Paul Davies, the violin maker, who actually crafted this wonderful instrument, and I'm going to get Paul up in a little while to talk about that. But we were discussing this problem where we have phrasing we might normally hear. That's more an Anglo kind of phrasing compared to what the more authentic phrasing of that kind of melody tends to go in this direction. Right, and it throws the whole thing out the window because it's in a different idiom of language. So the whole musicality of the language is a very musical thing foundationally. And the foundations of the language then dictate the musical representation of that, so very special. Anyway, what Paul suggested in a recent conversation, which I really like, was, well, we could represent that principle of translation by taking the existing folk song we could take that folk song, and if we set it as in an ancient Greek context of meter and movement and rhythm, it could sound something more like this. Right, because it completely breaks form with what's familiar. Now, that is not a scholarly researched comparison. It's an intuitive representation, but I think it's a fair one. So what I've done, I wanted an instrument that was pre-industrial for a start, and antiquities is pretty pre-industrial by a long shot. So what happened was, I thought, well, I think I'd like an instrument with gut strings and tuned down, because I really like the sound of that the slacker string response. And so I already had some wonderful instruments made by Paul Davies and with his Spur violins, and I've used them professionally for nearly 2 decades. Excuse me. And so we had this chat one day on the phone, and I said, Paul, I want an electric Baroque violin, and I want it made to normal Baroque specs, but I want it to be electric. And there was silence for a moment on the phone, and then we got rolling, and I think that conversation lasted at least 45 minutes. And we went back and forwards a bit with it, but what I particularly was hoping to do was to represent this pre-industrial sound, obviously with the gut strings and the slacker tuning and the design with less tension in the whole system, but with the very unique features that Paul uses with his instruments, with amplification with his own pickup system, very unique pickup system, and acoustic design which complements an amplified context for the instrument, yet allows it to function fully normally as a beautiful acoustic instrument as well, with identical response to a normal concert instrument. So I'm going to get Paul up to talk about this a little bit more. I'm going to come up and we'll have one of our slightly less than 45-minute discussions about it today. Paul Davies.
Howdy, Rupert.
There you go. So we'll pass the mic around. So do you want to talk a bit about what your initial feelings about this were, and then the process of actually arriving at this final design.
Sure. The commission that Rupert gave me for a Spur Baroque violin was immediately challenging for me. Going back to the origins of Spur violins, it's very much based on my mantra, I suppose, of respect for the past and vision for the future.
Which is interesting when you think about Aurelius. Sorry. It's interesting when you think about Aurelius in that context, because respect for the past, that's what his legacy lives on, yet we're adapting it into a modern world. We're birthing it into a modern world.
Great to have that connection. So as a trained traditional violin maker, I was very conscious of the history of the violin design and construction when I first developed Spur violins. And as Rupert said before, he was very much an early adopter of the Spur violin design and technology and opportunities that it represented. The design of the Spur semi-acoustic uses traditional construction techniques, albeit now with some modern technology as well. It is designed for the function of being amplified. So it has narrow ribs and a flat back, but the internals are still very much the same as a traditional violin. The obvious difference is the form of the instrument, which has the absence of three key features of a traditional violin. That is the cartouche outline, which is very much a Baroque design precedent. So it doesn't have the complex corners. Unlike the traditional violin, it doesn't have F-holes. Again, the F-holes are a traditional Baroque design cliche, I call it, and also the Ionic scroll. So the concept of the instrument was to have a connection to the past, but still have relevance for contemporary and modern design. That in itself is challenging to the very conservative feel of the traditional violin. But
also, it will be very educational for them as well.
Ideally.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when I received this phone call from Rupert commissioning a Baroque violin, it brought all of these concepts together for me in a very challenging way, particularly because I didn't know how much a Baroque design Spur violin should lean to the past or point forward to the future. It's usually a dream to get a commission where the artist gives you a free hand, and I like to have that occasion, but in this case I really relied heavily on the discussions I had with Rupert, so we could make sure we had all the details as best we could.
And I'll just add something there. I'll just add that it was a real pleasure for me working with Paul to say, this is the use I want to put it to, this is the kind of criteria I want to fulfill. You're the maker, you're the artist. Go do it. If there's anything really that you think might be challenging, give me a call. But I think part of the fun for me was giving Paul design freedom to come up with a lot of the features of this violin undictated by me. I think there's two things in that. One is I love that kind of collaborative adventure, because without that, with micromanagement, I think creativity gets incrementally destroyed. And so with giving Paul that free rein, for me, it kept it this living thing with the unknown, with the mystery coming from your side. And I think for you, as I find as a studio musician, when I get given a free hand in a studio session, I can actually bring something they would never have got if they'd micromanaged my playing and the sort of things that I was producing. So I'm hoping that that experience bore true for you too, that, you know, being given a length of rope, that you could create something that was really fun, but also was true from your heart as a creative artist.
There's no doubt that the violin is an icon of Western art, not just music, but Western art.
And you think of Man Ray, the photographer who did that photo.
Yeah. And then you think of gift cards with the violin and roses.
Yeah.
It spans all level of artistic endeavour. But
maybe we could set up a side business there.
I think it is true that the violin is an icon of Western art, and of course the original violin was developed during that Baroque period, not by one person, but by an artistic movement at that time. The Baroque violin differs very slightly from really a modern violin. The changes have been relatively small. The geometry of the fingerboard, the scale length of the strings, the composition of the strings being plain gut strings are the main key differences. And it is an instrument that was designed to be played in a very vibrant acoustic atmosphere, whereas today's music performances could be in a space like we're at today that doesn't have very much acoustic.
It's not in an acoustic shell in any way, is it? Yeah.
So amplifying violin makes perfect sense. The key point of this design was that the Spur violin usually has only one sound hole, but I wanted this instrument to be more acoustically vibrant, so it would sound actually more like a traditional Baroque instrument. So I added a second sound hole, and the challenge for me in doing that is that the traditional Spur violin has an elliptical end to the fingerboard, and that simply didn't work with the resolution of the two F-holes together. So when I decided to go back to the traditional fingerboard with the square end, it all came together. And now this instrument points forward to maybe even an acoustic, a traditional acoustic, semi-acoustic as well.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about what you've shared there is that, you know, there's an aesthetic in the design. It's not just we're not just following a formula of, you know, the fingerboard's so long, there's two F holes, the sound holes, they go there. There was a consideration of even whether we're going to have two. Well, from your side there was, in terms of your creative input. So, and even down to like you said, the shaping of the end of the fingerboard, but this beautiful coloration that we've got with the contrasting wood.
An older patina.
You want to talk about that?
Sure. It has an age, let's call it an age patina, not particularly overly antique like we do with some instruments. But I'm seeing it again, and I haven't seen it for some while. I'm happy that it does really represent that old and new at the same time. And of course, Spur design, like my own design philosophy, is well, I suppose, to be as minimalist as possible. And I'm interested in conversations with Rupert since making this instrument that Marcus Aurelius had an ability to simplify complex issues, and I feel as though in that sense this instrument represents that. One of the most recent adjustments that we've made is the E string peg actually broke, and it was a custom set of pegs, and I only had, I didn't have another one. So I fitted, instead of a maple peg, a boxwood peg, which you can clearly see stands out. Both Rupert and I agree that that peg will stay.
Oh, totally.
And that while the Baroque mantra of having, symmetry that this instrument exhibits, the broken peg adds some asymmetry, which is also very much part of my own design philosophy. And I'm reminded of William Blake's words of improvement makes straight roads, but crooked roads without improvement are roads of genius. And I think that resonates with the Aurelius a little bit too.
Yeah, I think that's lovely. And the other thing about the orphan peg is that the true meaning of Baroque is actually deviation. It's the variation. It's the variation from the symmetry, as much as it is about this. The music embodied symmetry, but the true meaning of Baroque means much more in the unpredictable, interesting departure from the known, or from the symmetrical. So in every way, I think that funny little confluence like that. And we were talking before about, starting. We were just talking presentation here about, one of Aurelius's things was when things are going wrong, start from accepting how things are, and you'll bring your temperature down about 500% right there. And I think the thing with this was, oh no, peg's broken. We've only got, they were a set of 4, Rupert. Oh, okay. So I don't get another peg like that. And then it was like, right, so what happens, where to now? So that's when the acceptance comes in. And I think it's an interesting thing. I mean, it's easy to separate philosophy from music, but I think it's an artificial separation, because it's the creative process in a way can't start until we have complete acceptance of what is the odd peg, and then it was just a matter of working it, and then I could have fretted about that for the rest of my life, right? I could have looked at that and been bothered by it. Now I look at it and go, yay, isn't it awesome? We didn't even think that up, Paul. Yet it was a response to what happened. So I think there's a lot of that kind of spirit of Aurelius's philosophy, in all these sort of daily occurrences, which I think, especially with the creation of the violin, I think it's a really nice touch.
I was admiring some of the sculptures in the foyer of the Hellenic Museum here in Melbourne, and they're missing limbs and other body parts.
Yeah, through damage over the millennia.
That somehow give more kudos to the work by what's not there, as opposed to what is there. It reminds me of the Spur scroll. Is that the Ionic scroll of a traditional violin is so well known that my idea with the Spur scroll is that without the scroll being there, it creates negative space, and that when things are so familiar, the mind's eye can put in that scroll, whatever it may be.
It's kind of relaxing to look at, isn't it? I find, that kind of deviation from the traditional design. It's actually, in a way, it brings peace, because I don't know, it's different without being disturbing.
Well, of course, the Ionic scroll goes back to the Greek.
It does.
Temples,
Yes.
The Ionic. The other two. Dorian and
Corinthian.
Corinthian. Thank you.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Paul.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to get on a little bit with the realisation of the music side of things and explain some more.
I'll take my seat.
Yeah, great. Thanks for coming up. So in a similar vein, I wanted to represent the kind of chaotic things that we face in life. Chaotic as in being kind of beyond our control, taking us to places that we hadn't really planned to go to, Could be an example of chaos. Chaos is an old Greek word which really relates strongly to creativity, actually. It's almost the definition of the creative womb of the universe. So I wanted to represent, as Paul alluded to before, the simplicity that Aurelius brings to things that at first looks like a furball of complexity. And what I like about Aurelius's work is that he's able to take a topic and completely reduce it. And I'm going to just return to one of his quotes here. We'll get this to slide. So it's got set the stage here a little bit. Okay, we can edit that. I can do that. Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present. In other words, your own intelligence, your own resources, your own resourcefulness, you're still going to have in the future for future things. So what you don't know how it's going to go, it's going to be exactly like all the other things that we've been through, where we got there and we didn't know how it was going to go, and we calmly assessed the situation, made the wisest decisions, and then here we are, the next leg of the journey. So things like that, and these are things that really bother human beings in our lives, you know. We are bothered by what's going to happen, what if they, what if we, what if, all that sort of thing. So there's a remarkable sort of simplicity. There's another one here. Okay, this is a good one. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it or interpretation of it. And this you have power to revoke at any moment. So we have a choice how we respond to things. And, you know, it's quite easy to blame things, even in material objects, you know, tool breaks or a peg breaks, and we get cross about it, or cross with the thing, damn thing broke. But actually, I could just go, oh, look at that, the peg broke. Better ring Paul, get another one. So it's how it works. And so I wanted to represent that with music of a great simplicity. So I chose a lot of what we call the Western modes. We know them as the modes: Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian, and a few others that I've discovered to represent these not only ancient ideas, ancient perspectives of wisdom, but also ancient scales. These are, you know, in Western music we usually just hear a major or a minor, and the modes open a doorway to all sorts of lovely things, like the Phrygian mode, for instance, which has, technically speaking, has a flattened second and a flattened sixth, which is very unusual. And you can't help when you hear that, I think, you can't help not to be transported to another earlier time. It's just, it's so built into those sort of tonalities. And of course the Roman Empire stretched from England to almost Southeast Asia. It was huge, and it crossed a lot of lines culturally, and of course that meant it crossed a lot of lines musically. So we had a lot of Eastern and Middle Eastern influences. We had a lot of this. We even had some more Eastern pentatonics. So in terms of the antiquities, particularly with relation to Rome, the Roman Empire, and Aurelius. I think these were sounds which were, we can say realistically, were part of life somewhere or other at various times in the Roman Empire. And so that's in the concert. You'll hear half the concert keeps slipping back into these ancient modes. The other half of what you hear in the concert, it's not literally half and half, it's interspersed half and half, are the sounds of what I would call humanity's own chaos and distress. So I chose to move away from diatonic tonality and the modes into something much more free tonal to represent that. So for example, I might do something if the topic was that whole idea of acceptance. We all know what it's like when we're finding it very difficult to accept something, that kind of agitated feeling. And so I would be representing that feeling rather than just trying to make it a peace out concert with lots of nice, peaceful ancient modes, to make it the contrast so that we keep getting this transition from the distressed into the resolved, from the chaos into the understood. So we might have something a little bit more agitated. And then move into perhaps something simpler. And so we're able to take these themes, and what I'll be doing is reading little quotes in the concert to give it a context for everybody, and then playing the mind as a loose cannon in its chaos, and then reflecting on that wisdom that Aurelius is bringing. Well, external circumstances are not causing your distress. Oh, that's right. And then we're representing that through the music. But I've taken it a step further. I recently had the opportunity to acquire a couple of lovely new bows, and as a Baroque instrument I decided to lash out and get a really nice Baroque bow, and it gives a certain, as we hope with the Baroque violin, it gives a certain pre-industrial sound, I like to call it a pre-industrial age sound, where we have the bow's physically shorter, so you run out of bow quicker, so the breath of the music moves very differently. We don't have these big, long, slurred 50 notes in one bow kind of thing, because you can't, and it wasn't what that period, and the sort of sound that it evokes from the gut strings, I think, there's a sort of dynamism in the Baroque, in the gut strings and the Baroque bow, which in its shortness of breath has its own incredible charm and beauty, and again relates very much to early bowed strings, which go back to what I think the 11th century, I think in China, places before it made its way over to European versions, as a loose, non-academic moment in instrument history. We can straighten that out another time. But it does give that lovely sound that was authentic to, I mean, originally these were hunting bows. That's what a bow is. It's a hunting bow, the curved bow with the string, and these early bows are actually convexly curved, not concavely curved. So you can see the difference. If I put these two bows, this is the Baroque bow with where it curves outwardly at the top on the wood, and it's not quite a modern bow, it's a classical bow which followed the Baroque, and it does definitely, it's a concave curve with the wood. So what I'm doing is I'm going to be having a bit of fun in the performance, not only representing the different voices of the human soul with different kind of melodic material, different intervallic construction, but I'm also going to be using different bow to represent. So with the classical bow, the later bow, which is a more high tension bow, it's got a longer hair, it's made for those more, although not the fully modern bow, it's well on the way to being what we're used to as a modern bow, where we have much more capacity. We can hold all these sort of dizzying long phrases with a bow that it not only doesn't sound well, it's really awkward and in some cases impossible to do with the Baroque bow. So we christened this the bow of trouble at the last performance, and this one was the Baroque bow was the bow of wisdom. So that's kind of the whole gamut of that I can give as a talk, as an artist, explaining as much as one can in words what is to come as an art performance. So yes, that's the whole story really, and this lovely violin, and this is now the Marcus Aurelius violin. There's all these Stradivari violins and Guarneris, and some famous part of its provenance in instruments, pedigree or provenance, who's owned it. Well, this is going to be the Marcus Aurelius violin forever henceforth. This, world first, one of its kind, Baroque electric violin, and I'm thrilled that with this little partnership that I'm able to bring hopefully some of Aurelius's wisdom back into the modern world and see it become a prerequisite for political leadership. Imagine that. Wow. Thanks very much.